Okay, hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webinar, Digital Safety for Students, Keeping Student Data Private and Access Secure. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am the editor-at-large for eSchool News, and I am happy you are joining us today for what I know will be a very insightful and important conversation. This event is brought to you by Lenovo. Lenovo is a $70 billion revenue global technology powerhouse, ranked 171 in the Fortune Global 500, employing 75,000 people around the world. Focused on a bold vision to deliver smarter technology for all, Lenovo has built on its success as the world's leading PC company by expanding into key growth areas, including server, storage, mobile solutions, and services. With over 20 years of education technology leadership and a team of experts focused on higher education, Lenovo offers flexible solutions which are ready to create a secure, dynamic environment for collaborative learning and a borderless campus. As a long-term partner, Lenovo can deliver complete and customized solutions with devices, software, and services designed to help build skills, empower career development, maximize each student's potential, and prepare them for tomorrow's workforce. I should also mention there is certainly a focus on K-12 education as well. Skipped over that. Lenovo also has partnered with industry leader Absolute Software to bring endpoint security and resilience to fortify organizations against external threats. All Lenovo devices have Absolute Software embedded into the firmware of their devices before they leave the factory. Lenovo and Absolute have partnered since 2005, offering a broad portfolio of solutions, several of which are unique to Lenovo. So now, before we get to our conversation, I'd like to take a minute to go over some features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. The event is being recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with the PDF of the slides. If you have a question or comment for the panelists, and I really hope you will use those features and tools, because I think the conversation coming from the audience really helps the panelists know what you're looking for. You can use the chat function that you can launch by clicking on chat. Feel free to use this feature also to contact someone from the eSchool News team if you're having a technical question. So with these housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started with our conversation and some introductions. First, we have Betsy Klein. As team lead for Lenovo Education Software, Betsy's primary focus is SaaS products. Betsy's deep technical knowledge across the entire Lenovo software portfolio allows her to provide schools with effective and efficient security and protection solutions. Also with us today, Adam Benjamin. Adam has over 20 years experience in the cybersecurity space, working with Lenovo to explain best-of-breed security tools and solutions to their customers. And last but certainly not least, DJ Whitlock. DJ has over 15 years in the cybersecurity space as a senior sales engineer for Absolute's channel team. And she works to educate OEM partners on Absolute's unique position in the firmware and the powerful remote features that give customers constant visibility and control of their devices. So I think everyone on the call here knows that cybersecurity is an ever-present concern for most of us accessing the internet. Unfortunately, students aren't always thinking about cyber attacks when they access sites for curriculum, research, and entertainment, whatever that may be, from their one-to-one devices. So now, prevalent since the pandemic, especially, schools' exposures to cyber attacks have greatly increased due to the expanded remote and hyperflex learning that we have. And Betsy, maybe we'll start with you talking about what the state of play is in cybersecurity. I mean, it has always been a topic of conversation that is top of mind for leaders, but even more so now, right?
Absolutely. And not to be punny there, but we have found that since the pandemic, the initial need was we've got to get devices in hands of students because they've got to keep learning, right? And
Yep.
So it was buying up all of the devices as quickly as they could, because that's what the technical staff needed to do. But then when they had a moment to pause, where am I leaving holes in my network? What am I going to do about endpoint management? What am I going to do about getting this device back? And so that's where the discussion is really shifted today, because now we know these schools have these devices, they're in the hands, they have replacement devices for these students, but now how do we keep our network and our students and our staff safe? And I think that's what our call is really going to be about today with both Adam and DJ. They are experts in this field. We have exclusive relationships with them, like you had said, Kevin, that allow us to offer our schools extra security layers and confidence in the fact that they're protecting, data. I'm sure we're all seeing the need for these data privacy agreements and things like that as they come, as they're looking at different softwares and things along those lines. And that's something we can all address.
Yeah, and I know that there's a number of different types of cybersecurity threats, and I think folks who are out there in the audience will read in the newspaper all these various things, that not only for schools but just in general, but specifically for schools, there seem to be specific threats when it comes to, there are phishing attempts, there's malware attempts. But Adam, you were mentioning that ransomware seems to be kind of a primary threat that is really hitting schools the hardest. Can you talk a little bit about maybe each of those threats, but maybe starting off with ransomware?
Yeah, I think ransomware is one of those. That's the explosion, right? That makes the big news splash. That's a very point in time detonation of an attack at a customer's site. But all of those things, phishing, other forms of malware. If you look at like the LAUSD example from a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, we all saw when they got hit with ransomware, but they probably have been hacked or attacked months before that, right? With somebody phishing for credentials in their organization, somebody planting malware in their environment. If you look at what happened with LAUSD, when they, and I would say rightly, but that's up for debate, didn't pay the ransomware, then some of their data got leaked. Well, that the attackers must have been in there for some amount of time to be able to exfiltrate or copy that data off of their networks, off their devices. So that's what they're K-12 and school districts especially are up against. And for the bad actors, it's just it's all about money, right? That's why they do what they do. They want to make money in a not a good way, but that's what motivates them. That's what they look for from an attacker. Why am I going to pick on this school district or this customer or this whoever manufacturing plant? It's because they want to get paid, right? They go for the low-hanging fruit from a pay perspective.
Yeah, and you talk about LA, and third largest school district in the country, right? And you could probably also say the world at that point, right, with the number of students. But this isn't a problem that is just for districts of that size, right? I mean, you can have smaller districts who are getting just hit hard that way as well.
Yeah, very true. And I think K-12, especially, or any public sector entity, is a little, if you look at it from an attacker's perspective, a little easier to breach, because I know what your domain is. I know your, lausd.edu. I probably can pretty easily on the public domain find a list of your faculty and staff. And so now I can start guessing email address names, and I can start doing the phishing attack, right? I can start trying to, a perfect example of this was, and this isn't LAUSD, it's a different customer, but K-12 school district got hit because an attacker sent a Word doc and worded it into the school office, to one of the administrators in the office, and said, hey, here's Johnny's physical release form so he can participate in football. And it was a Word doc. It looked totally legit to whoever would look at it, but of course the Word doc was a malware attack. So those kind of public records that school districts have to have make them a little more easy to target from again, if I'm a lazy bad guy, I want the easy button, right? I want to be able to do as easily as possible. And so those are the kind of things that make them more vulnerable.
Yeah, and DJ, talk a little bit about your experience as you've watched the evolution of not only the crimes become more sophisticated, as Adam talked about, but also how the technology that you're working with is being created to combat it.
This topic is what everyone should be talking about. I mean, the U.S. school districts that are getting hit, the numbers aren't coming down as much as you would expect. K-12 is the second most targeted sector for ransomware. So, Absolute's been in this game for 25 years now. When desktops first hit the schools, that's when Lenovo put the persistence of absolute to, protect that rather large, physical hardware investment. And we've just been progressing along with the changes in schools. And, the threats were all about theft, in the beginning, but now it's definitely about data, not necessarily on, an education kids device, but it doesn't take much to get into the into the system. And as Adam mentioned, they're sitting in there for 6 months, a year, compiling information to be able to then go ask for these incredible amounts of money. I think the industry was in 2021 at least was $3.5 billion is what ransomware was collected. And that's just the school districts that are talking about, yes, I went ahead and paid, as opposed to just keeping it close to their chest as well. So keeping the devices that are now very often still not in the classrooms, keeping those protected with proper anti-malware, et cetera, that should be at forefront of the school's minds. And I think Absolute brings a lot to the table just by, regardless of what that anti-malware product might be, we can, let them understand, is it healthy on all of these endpoints, et cetera. So lots of answers there as well.
Yeah, Betsy, I think as you mentioned earlier that the pandemic seems to have accelerated a lot of these issues as well, right? Because when you've gone to maybe where you've had an architecture where you're kind of focused on the campus, while there are a lot of districts who maybe were going one-to-one, it might not have included more sophisticated hybrid setups as we have now, which just gives more opportunity, right? Talk a little bit about the added exposure due to COVID.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. I mean, these tech directors and tech support folks were all focused on protecting the device while it was on their network. It wasn't very common that these devices were going home to school or going home from school until the pandemic hit, unless it was a district that maybe had a little bit more funding, right?
Yep.
And so then it comes down to the Wi-Fi on school buses and how do you protect all this information? And it just leaves everybody so open and vulnerable, but everybody was in panic mode. They needed to keep their students learning. And now it's, okay, we've done this. The devices are in the students' hands. We've seen some positivity out of this, but now how do I protect my student, my network, and the device? And that's really what it boils down to when we're talking about security, because it's kind of like what Adam said, that student data is really important to keep hidden. Those kids don't have any credit cards, and hopefully these folks that are out there stealing that information aren't using it for that when they turn 18 and try to go buy their first car, and people don't think about the long-term effects of these attacks and the wasted tax dollars on devices that aren't recovered from students. I mean, it's just unfolded Pandora's box, really. So that's why I'm so thankful for these partnerships that we have with SentinelOne and Absolute, because they help us protect our customers, right?
Yep. So Adam, talk a little bit. I mean, what are some of the pivots that districts have made in terms of techniques to secure systems going to remote? I mean, if there are folks maybe here on the call who, I think by 2019, every district pretty much had some sort of security system set up, but maybe not ready to go to that next level. Talk about some of the things that they may need to know in order to take those next steps.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I'm just sitting here listening, and I'm like, we don't want to paint a complete gloom and doom picture. I'm like, okay, the sky's falling out of here, right? This can do, right? And there's no silver bullet. That is true. There's not. If I just did this one thing, I wouldn't have this problem. But don't let that stop you as a school district or a CISO or chief technology officer at a school. So okay, well, what I have I'm gonna have to make do with what I have. There are things you can do, and like Betsy said, I think COVID and all that push suddenly to go remote was mostly good, but exposed a lot of those gaps that we had in our security plan that we could have done before 2019. But now we're like, oh my gosh, now I've got to do this because My devices aren't behind the firewall anymore. They're not, locked in the closet at night or weekends. And so, and a lot of you customers are probably getting some push from if you have cyber insurance, your cyber insurance providers are giving you some push on, you've got to modernize that endpoint security stack, right? You've got to have the legacy antivirus, the old McAfee's and Semantics, which were great 10 years ago. They're just not protecting you against the modern, what you need an EDR, endpoint detection response solution for now that can hunt for and alert you for bad behavior in your environment, as opposed to looking for a bad file that some user that has the t-shirt on that says, I click on anything, right clicks on. You need something that looks at the behavior of what's going on in that environment. And there are lots of tools out there. So I mean, SentinelOne, obviously unbiased, is one of those, but you definitely should do your homework and look at what your fellow school districts are using, what do the analysts say about those solutions, and start testing and looking at what else is out there compared to what you have. The good news is, I mean, we see in the news all the bad stuff is constantly evolving. It's in some ways getting worse, getting more sophisticated. But the good news is, so is the tool set to protect you. So there's definitely, like DJ said, Absolute's constantly evolving and protecting. Looking at where the devices are, who's using them, where are they? Are those security tools in place that I pay good money for and deployed? And then those tool sets themselves, right, to stop and block ransomware. One thing that SentinelOne we try to show customers is, I just need the tool to work as automated as possible. I don't have there's no industry that is immune to not having enough IT staff, right? So you need a tool that's automated and can just stop and block as much as possible. And when something does need attention, I need to automatically be able to respond to that. So that's what you should look at as you try to harden your cybersecurity tool set and look at what else is out there.
And I think just to tack onto that, Adam, is, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, right? And I think that's what a lot of people fall into. We have our semantic. We're not necessarily worried about the endpoint management piece because that's not a need today. But I think it's taking that deep breath now that things have kind of slowed down a little bit and going, am I truly happy with my antivirus? Or am I truly happy with how we're managing our devices within the district? Do I need to do some sort of an inventory and figure out how to do a better job with this now that we're kind of done with the craziness a little bit? And so that's one thing I always encourage my districts to look at. Are you really happy with the tools? Or is it the fact that you don't want the pain point of having to implement something else, but is it worth it in the end? And that's something that I just encourage everybody to take a peek at, even in the summer months when things aren't as crazy for you guys.
Yeah, it seems that having covered this space for a while, there seem to be disparate solutions, or historically there have been disparate solutions in terms of here's my data protection plan, here's my DJ. When I think about Absolute, here's my asset management software, right? Which maybe not necessarily was focused on security as much as it was focused on keeping your budgets, in terms of, where things are. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what sounds to me like the combination of some disparate systems into one kind of overall holistic solution?
From a point of view of Absolute, I think we've always had that story where we make other products stronger, and reporting on just the entire status quo of what is my security stance? Am I protected in these various ways? We lost control of a teacher's device that had student records. What was the state of that machine when we lost control? Was it encrypted, etc.? So I think, with Absolute, it's not just a matter of protecting the hardware like it started. It's definitely a matter of protecting the data when it matters. And then also answering questions and I guess solving pain points for, people that are on the front lines. So like, teachers, I don't know if we have any teachers on the call, but I'm sure you guys all know some, if they need to be able to monitor the actual use of this hardware that's being purchased, software solutions put in place, to help them learn. They need to be able to monitor, are these students actually using these devices? And we can even help them understand, how much are they using them during school hours, and how much are they using them after hours as well? And, just being able to monitor that usage on and off the campus, and, be able to help boost grades. So you've got a classroom or an individual that is not excelling, they're just not succeeding in what you must admit is probably one of the most important times in their life, getting an education up front. If they're not succeeding there, the software can let you know, hey, they're not using the tools that are proving themselves out as being super helpful to students to actually start learning and getting grades up. So there's a lot of reporting, et cetera, to help monitor and review who's using them and how is that comparing. The challenges that school districts face really haven't changed. It's, I've spent a big chunk of change on this hardware, and, are we getting our money's worth out of it? So being able to understand and control devices, I guess, wrapping back around to the security aspect, you can't control what you can't see. Being able to see these devices, regardless of where they're calling from, and being able to, glean data and information back off of their websites that are being utilized and are staying in focus, being able to get metrics on that. Are they the websites that the kids should be on? For learning purposes, or are they actually detrimental and a big distraction, during the school? So there's, how to ensure that they've got control of those devices, I think is really the number one pull for absolute. It's a constant digital tether to those machines. And if the child decides, or someone decides for them, that they're going to wipe that OS and, basically take that machine and tell the kid, you have to report this stolen, then there's all kinds of tools to let the administrators know it's absolutely still calling in from right where it was before with this different login. So being able to protect children from, either a bad path that they're going down, or possibly a bad situation that they might happen to be in. There's just a lot of different ways that security can come into play. And it's not just about protecting the data, but that's absolute certainly our focus as well, is securing those machines and the data on them as well. But being able to answer those audit questions from an IT point of view for like the superintendents to go back and say, I have made a substantial investment in this hardware and these software. It's in the kids' hands. They're utilizing it as we would hope. And we can, provide some metrics back as to return rates that are going to just skyrocket because you do in fact have control of those machines. So I'll quit talking about, that unless I've missed your question point. I'd love to keep adding in if you have any more questions about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was really insightful. But it leads me to another question where if I'm sitting on this call and I'm a director of technology, to have that amount of data coming at me, which I'm assuming is in real time in terms of tracking devices and tracking usage, sounds kind of overwhelming. It sounds like my job has now become 24/7. I'm assuming that there are some automated features that can help keep that those tasks under control.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, I would actually take it the other direction and say it's almost like having a virtual head count added to your staff. Everybody's stretched thin with lots to do, and someone logging into several consoles to find out what is the state of the world and all these various things I have to keep an eye on, versus having one pane of glass where they can see what is the state of my encryption on machines that have it. What's the state of my anti-malware? Where are these machines? Are they calling in from where I'm expecting to? And then yes, with automation, you can trigger rules and alerts. If this machine makes a call, connects to the internet from somewhere outside of this geolocation fence that maybe you put just around your entire city, certainly can put it around separate campuses, as that granular, but you can definitely get alerting to let you understand, I need to take action on a particular machine, not the 10,000 I have under my control. And I can see by my dashboard that I'm healthy and pretty sweet sailing right now from all of these aspects. I've got multiple machines that don't show they have anti-malware running. Let me trigger down into those and take some actions and get those installed, et cetera. So
that seems like they kind of, go ahead, Adam. Yeah.
I think that's key for those IT directors. Again, it's like, how do I how do I get insight before I'm in trouble, right? Like
Yeah.
what DJ just said was, so this machine isn't, no one's told me it's lost or stolen, but it's calling in from Mexico, right? So it's obviously not in the hands of who it's supposed to be in anymore. Even before that machine starts to become compromised even further, you get that visibility up front that you need to do something, right? So I think that's key. And then from back to your, Kevin, your original question, I think all the tools that you should definitely, if you're looking at, upgrading or changing or evaluating what you currently have, you should be, we always talk about security versus, how much effort is required to do that. There are tools out there that should be able to make you more secure and your life easier at the same time, or make you less resources, less people to have to deal with. And I think absolutely, and Sentinel probably both fit in that category, depending on what you're currently using. But I mean, that's what, if I was in your shoes, I would be like, okay, how can I do what I need to do to be more secure, but at the same time, get better visibility, get better reporting, get, more automation in my tools, so I don't have to run around chasing down, a ton of alerts or random concerns.
Did that resonate with you, Betsy?
Yeah, and what I think is even more beautiful about the partnerships that we have with these folks is our education team this last fiscal year put together some education bundles where we're able to combine all sorts of software titles which offer you cost savings, significant cost savings. So we have some bundles that include both Sentinel-1 and Absolute, but also our Lenovo-owned classroom management software, Land School, and our own filtering solution. We have so many ways to come to you with a holistic approach. Lenovo really is shifting their mind share, and we want to come to you so that you can come to us, and we are a one-stop shop that takes care of you and makes sure that you have the best of breed solutions at the best possible price.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Now, I know there's always kind of two sides to the coin when it comes to cybersecurity. You have the nitty gritty technology, the APIs that we've just been talking about, because the software that we've been talking about. But then there's also the other side of that coin, which is human behavior, right? Because it's no matter how sophisticated you can make the software, as you're mentioning, it's that PDF for the football team that slides under and gets underneath. How important is it for a director of technology to understand and communicate those human elements to not only the students, but the administrators, and now more so because of COVID and parental involvement, the parents? Maybe I'll throw that to you first, Adam. You're nodding your head.
Yeah, there is a big responsibility I think we have in the security space to educate, especially like K-5, right? Those first getting on the internet, first thing being knowing how just to make a joke, how to spell internet, right? First figuring out how to get to connected, and what does that mean for my privacy and my data and who, my digital persona or who I am on the internet. Because it all starts with them understanding what they're getting themselves into, right? And then that easily, just that phrase, right? That covers everybody. That covers teachers. That covers like, what am I getting myself into when I do this thing? And that's from a cybersecurity privacy perspective. That's a whole other tangent we have a whole webinar on. Is the organizations that collect your data, they do that for money too, right? They have a reason that they kind of like to know what websites you're visiting and all that. And you need to, I would want, and I have second and third grade kids, I want them to understand, when you give up that information, how is that being used? And I'm not paranoid about it, I'm fine with it, but you need to understand it, right? You need to know what that information is being collected and collated for and who it's being sold to, et cetera. So I think that's all, it's rolling back to, I'm sorry, long answer to a short question was, we do need to educate both the students and the teachers, I think, on the risks and the responsibilities that we all have as digital citizens.
And DJ, yeah, I think about that too, in terms of when you're tracking devices. I think about acceptable use policies and other aspects of kind of managing human behavior. Is that something that you've seen in the day-to-day work with your districts?
It is. There's a lot of capability in kids these days. It's a little shocking at how advanced they are. So there is, we're not just there. I don't think our school districts are necessarily just competing against the dark hoodie, in another country. I mean, they're trying to defeat their sixth graders down the hall
So the dark hoodie in algebra class.
with Pac-Man on the back, but still, those guys are pretty talented, and being able, they're installing VPNs, they're going on to locations that they shouldn't be able to get to, through the typical security that's been stood up and from them, but they're able to hack around and get in there. So the ability to see that activity happening, to take advantage of scripting if you need to lock a machine down in a variety of ways, just being able to stay a step ahead of just malicious internal users, and then just users that don't understand why they're not capable of connecting or getting into a particular applications. We can see so many details on the hardware to let them understand, hey, for instance, that hard drive is nearly full. So that machine is a sluggish machine for a reason. Let's take a look at how you could delete some files, either remotely through our tool, or just in front of the machine. But there's a lot you can learn about a kid downloading 14 movies onto their machine, and then things do get a little sluggish when they're out of space, etc. One little example.
Yeah, absolutely. And Betsy, I mean, this is just another example of some of the new responsibilities that are kind of thrust upon not only tech directors, but assistant superintendents and superintendents, right?
Yeah, so there is an example that I can share. I'm not going to name the district, but they are a district in Texas, and they were actually an existing Absolute customer and moved away from it for a period of time. But once COVID hit and all these devices started going home with these students, they were lost and they couldn't find them. And, even if it's just a Chromebook, that adds up fairly quickly in a large school district. And so we had been working with them to discuss the specific capabilities with Absolute and the geofencing and device tracking to see if we could get some of those devices back, because that's taxpayer dollars, and no school district wants to say, well, we lost it. I think that and it's like, I think it was either DJ or it was DJ that said, if a teacher loses their device and that had student data on it and things like that, I mean, it's just, this stuff is so valuable to secure everything that you need. But that's just one specific example that I have right now.
Yeah. Adam, any tales from the field for you in terms of that sort of, we mentioned LAUSD, but...
Yeah, I think that what we see a lot of in the, in that endpoint or antivirus space is that, I think somebody mentioned earlier, right? The inertia, the not wanting to change, right? What I've got is good enough until it's not, which is unfortunate, right? You don't want to be in that situation where you find out, oh, what I had wasn't good enough. There are things that's customers can take, but we see still a lot of customers are on those old legacy antivirus tools that are actually, again, from a resource perspective, harder on the devices, but require more resources on the devices and more people to manage than a much better protection solution like SentinelOne, or something that's AI based, that's looking for bad behavior, not for bad files. And that's, there's just way too many LAUSDs in the news, right? That's the latest one. I'm surprised it hasn't been replaced by another one since then.
Well, DJ, if someone's here on the call and they have a number of different legacy systems, maybe, or kind of a mishmash of things going on, what would you suggest for them to be the first step in terms of making that advancement, or kind of bringing things into what we're talking about here, which is kind of a more sophisticated, holistic, solutions-based strategy?
Well, as far as trying to get their arms wrapped around, what is our entire fleet that we currently have? What does it look like? Where is it at? Who has them, et cetera? Installing Absolute will actually, help tremendously with that if they have the ability to push software out to an existing fleet. Of course, with school districts, they're nearly always coming back in. So you've got the opportunity to re-image. And at that point, you've got that constant digital tether out to those devices to understand exactly where they're at. And being able to prove, especially in these one-to-one engagements, or just going back to the city board and saying, we can, with confidence in this reporting, month after month, show the utilization of these notebooks. This is a program we have to continue funding because the students are using these machines for X amount of hours a day, et cetera. And, this is the way to prove it in doing that. Absolute is agnostic. We're in the firmware. We started in Lenovo in 2005, but I think we're in 26 different OEMs. So if they have some outlier machines that are, not of a more typical brand, there's a good chance that we're going to have a firmware persistence agent already shipping in those as well, because we've been growing this OEM list for so long. But even if they have a model that doesn't have our persistence, our ability to put ourselves back into that machine, the features still work as long as you're running a Windows OS, Chrome OS, and Android OS, and certain Linux distributions. Then you will have feature parity. I should say, though, Linux is not feature parity. There's 4 that are, pretty big to the school environment, reporting, messaging, device freeze, et cetera. So, but, most devices with the Windows OS, then we don't care who's making them. Our agent's going to function on that. We're just running as a services in the Windows OS. So super easy to deploy. We've got school districts deploying 10,000 machines in a week. And this product is stood up and you're monitoring those machines. Lots of different features we could talk about on a different, platform maybe, but the IT's ability to support, 200 schools, 800,000 teachers, 90,000 students, theft and just misplacement of those machines and not getting those back for so many different reasons. I mean, the numbers just, get up into the high 90s. You at least know who had it and who you can take further actions with, if they don't, because it was last calling from their home or, in their possession with their login, et cetera. So lifecycle management and being able to prove the investment, I think, are 2 big things.
Yeah. I guess a question for all the panelists here, I'll throw out. I mean, another complication is now with students coming back into the classroom, and this was a problem beforehand as well, but bringing their own devices and bringing their own access through cellular networks back onto a campus, or even doing things offsite back at home. That must add a layer of complexity in terms of network security, right? I'll ask each of you to talk a little bit about how those sort of issues can be addressed.
Yeah, I can start a little bit of that because I was just thinking about your previous question, and they kind of tie together. But school districts have a big challenge on, okay, this isn't my device. I'm not responsible for managing it, but I am responsible for protecting the environment that they're in and the student that's using it and all those things. So it's an interesting balance that they have to walk when it's a BYOD, bring your own device kind of situation. And even in, like I said, I've got kids, there might be the school issue device, but right next to that is their whatever, their phone, their tablet, their own personal tablet device, all the other devices connecting to the school network, using resources, or very fluidly jumping back and forth, doing the schoolwork on the not a Chromebook because they need Windows for a little more power or whatever. So that's challenging. I think and what loops back to your earlier question that DJ was talking about was like, where do I start? Like, what's the first kind of things they should look at? And there are good governmental resources, or good public resources out there on what a cybersecurity framework should look like, right? So that's where I would, like, the first thing you got to do, what's the 12-step program? Admit you have a problem is the first step. So look at what you currently have, right? Look, you got to measure where you're at so you can measure success, right? Measure that you're making those steps forward, and those, the NIST framework. There are other frameworks that can help you evaluate what you have in place versus what would help you be more secure. Like I said, don't be discouraged. There's no silver bullet that says, hey, if I just got this one thing, I'd be protected. Can I make progress, right? That's, if you're a golfer, right, you never have a perfect game, but you can get better. You just got to keep on doing the things that you can do to move forward.
Betsy, any thoughts on that?
I would just go back to what I said earlier, where, when you're looking at your environment, what your students are using, how they're using it, what you want to give them access to, are you satisfied with your current solution or are you comfortable? You've really got to differentiate between the two. Because, software and technology, everything is still, it's just evolving because we were forced to, right?
Mhm.
And so don't get comfortable. Look what else is out there. Protect your students, protect the data, protect your network. That's really, it's just taking a glance at it. I think it's just so important for districts to at least do that once a year. Evaluate what you're using, why you're using it, and is it successful in your environment?
And see what else is out there. I think that's the thing that
Yeah.
surprises me, that customers, people, whoever, they don't realize, because they have used whatever they're using for the past 5-10 years, they don't know what's possible.
Mhm.
So that is also part of, it takes time, but do some investigation, look at what else is out there in this space. Like Betsy just said, it's constantly evolving from a tools perspective, protection perspective.
Mhm.
DJ, any thoughts in terms of the devices that you can track?
Yeah, I think being able to track them regardless of where they're at, whether it's, by local IP of where they're based in buildings or just by geolocation, but, being able to put your arms around what is my entire fleet and being able to manage that entire fleet. And then if you have other applications that are, in a security stack that need to continue working, as they get deployed, and not 30 days, 60 days later start dissipating off and, stop having the endpoints compliant from, a VPN point of view, an anti-malware point of view. So Absolute has a lot of solutions for keeping other applications at their best, just as we do, with the hardware. So I think, understanding that there can be threats that are going to pop up in such a fast amount of time, and being able to reach out to those devices with scripting and either quarantine them from coming back into the school district's internet, or just installing what will keep that particular device up to date and healthy for whatever the latest threat happens to be. So that on or off the network reporting and maintenance and contact is I think a key thing to remember. Just being able to give asset intelligence about, where are the machines, who's got them, where are they calling in from, and what web apps and what software applications are they actually utilizing on those machines, all giving you a great picture to go back and say all of our investments are functioning, working, or we have information to make a better decision about an application that maybe is not being used, or web usage licenses that you've used that are not getting utilized. So it can help both ways.
Thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about the data privacy aspect of things for students, which I think is probably another distinction that you might find from maybe some other vertical industries, where, if you're an employee of a company and you're using the email, that's all on you and you're in that environment. I think in education, sometimes that can get a little bit more tricky, especially when it comes to parents and the use of data for students. Talk a little bit, each of you can, about that kind of distinction between the real world and the education world in terms of the security of student data versus, say, employee data, and maybe even I'll say the word surveillance, the oversight of some of the language that maybe students may be using in correspondence or logins and passwords. So Betsy, maybe I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, so there's a lot to answer in that question. But I can say from personal experience, I have a 13-year-old who is very clever, not a shock to anybody, but he used his school account to sign up for some inappropriate things. And it took me a hot minute to find out. So yeah, we need to solution this out. So there's a couple of different ways that I think our partnerships can do that. First, obviously, DJ saying the ability to see what applications, where they're going, the analytics piece, right? But how else are they using this device? And then the question becomes, how do I make that device maybe a little bit more school focused as opposed to YouTube focused? So that's where our web filtering solutions come in. That's where Land School comes in, the ability to monitor the students during school time, make sure that they're doing what they should be doing when they do it. But that's the beauty of this holistic approach. You can come to us and say, hey, these are our pain points. Can you solution this out? And the answer is likely going to be yes. So I think I kind of answered that question, but was there any other caveat that you wanted me to address there?
No, that's certainly an interesting question. Adam, any thoughts that resonate with that?
Yeah, from an EDR perspective, yes, or next gen antivirus perspective, it's not like we try to not get into the privacy data of the students, of the users. Yeah. But I will say, if you look at the stats, like 80+% of all malware attacks start with some kind of credential stealing, right? And those phishing attacks, when we think of phishing attacks, we always think email, but that's one way. But I can get phishing, I can do phishing attacks on you with a website, there's lots of ways I can do that. And again, that's very smart. 13-year-old, right, when they're going, that's where those guys lurk, right? They lurk on those not too legit websites trying to harvest data about users and stuff. And I think we said earlier, probably school districts don't, they're not that concerned about the user account for a fifth grader, but in fact, if I can get that user account, that's going to lead me to take over that machine and get the teacher's account that's on that machine. I mean, that's those low level, we would say, or student IDs and credentials are a great place to start, because those are the people who will click on anything, or they'll do stuff that I can trick them into do with social engineering, right? That I probably can't trick an IT director into doing. So that's where that kind of convergence happens in the endpoint protection space is credential stealing and phishing and protecting from that.
And DJ, I think I stepped on a thought you may have had on that.
Well, it just depending on what products are being purchased in these instances. Lenovo took advantage of Absolute's ability to converse through the protected firmware, that secure level there, to do one of the products called RSVP. So if you've got students that are out there setting administrator passwords on these machines when they get them, then you've just lost control to being able to, manage and update that machine. But more importantly, if it's left just open, then I think you're more susceptible for attacks in that way as well. So if the product includes the feature of RSVP, remote supervisor password setting, then being able to go in and take control of that supervisor password from an IT point of view, where so many of the nefarious players are looking, they need control in the BIOS to be able to make certain changes. Mm-hmm. So taking that away from them is another good step to take, right from the forefront as well.
So let's get some nitty gritty here, some kind of like real best practices advice for the folks who are listening and watching. In terms of steps, and I'll ask this to each of you in turn, what should they do today? What should they plan for the next year? And what should they think about over the next 3 years? And who am I going to put on the hot seat first? Let's say, let's put Adam there first.
Yeah, I would, I think kind of what we talked through was either, I think to Betsy's point, look at where you think your gaps are, look at what you're struggling with or concerned about, what keeps you up at night is that's the marketing term, but anyway, that, or it could lead to, like, go look at some of the NIST or cybersecurity frameworks and start measuring where you're at. Like, you can't move forward unless you know where you're standing already. So that's, I think, where I would start today, is go and be careful. Like Betsy said, it's not, am I comfortable with what I have, but is what I have actually working, and is it, where it needs to be? And then the hopefully good news in this space is, I think all of the solutions that we talk about, they're all subscription-based, cloud-based solutions. So whatever you have today, when that comes up for renewal, am I going to go evaluate what else is out there? Because it is constantly changing. It's worth looking around to see what you don't know, like what else is still out there. So I would say that's kind of this year, right, or whenever that renewal is coming up in the future. And then part of this year also would be I was just looking in the background here at some of the resources available to educate faculty and staff on cybersecurity. There's a ton of stuff out there. Again, the NIST framework has a whole dedicated section on how do I educate my faculty and staff and students on cybersecurity. So that should become, it's a little late to put it in your curriculum this year probably, but think about how do I incorporate that kind of conversation maybe with my staff over the summer and my students next year.
Great, thanks. And how about you, Betsy?
Yeah, thank you. So Adam kind of stole a little bit of my thunder there, but you know, I think my best advice for school districts is don't settle, and you know, be open-minded to solutions. And you know, if you've got a pain point or you're hearing something from a specific group of teachers, really listen to them, because sometimes, because they're boots on the ground with these devices in those students' hands, that it's worth listening to what would make their lives easier. So I would say be open-minded when it comes to those solutions. And it's like Adam and I have both just said, I mean, when it comes time for renewal, how easy is it to just cut that PO and keep the status quo? It's so easy to do that. But I do think as technology is evolving, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself if that's your best practice. You've got to get out there and learn what's in the market, what's new, what are other districts doing. So again, back to my original point, go into this open-minded, never settle. And I think this goes across the board for all of the years that you were mentioning, Kevin. It's just really analytically looking at what solutions you're having, are they working, and is that what my districts, my staff, and my students need? So I think that's probably my best answer.
Yeah, most school districts are probably good about doing that with hardware, right? They always want to see what the latest hardware is, keep up to date on the hardware refreshes. The same is very true for the tools used to protect your students and your devices.
I think I would finish that up by saying that, you know, a great place to start is figuring out what your biggest pain points are. And if it is, you know, stop loss, if it's, you know, recovering those machines, then, you know, getting a game plan together, you know, going forward with solutions that are available, like Absolute, that would help with that, you know. Or is it staying compliant? You know, you've got, maybe you do have software licenses or web usage licenses, et cetera, and, you know, being able to monitor and get the metrics and just stay compliant. And then, you know, I think understanding that you've got peace of mind. So it is going to ensure, you know, HIPAA level compliant data protection of data that is on those machines. And if a machine is compromised, you've got remediation actions that you can take, which go a huge way with an auditor when you have in fact lost you know, a nurse's machine or a teacher's machine, special education, et cetera. They've got health records possibly on there, much less student records, and being able to say that we had solutions in place on the machine just in the get-go is a huge check mark. And then being able to say we were alerted and understood when we had an issue or a breach. The child told us, or the teacher told us, or we could just figure it out through alerting, through these tool sets, that we had a breach. And so then you go in and you make decisions. Do I want to wipe that machine completely of its data and say, you know, here's a record of me targeting sensitive data and being able to wipe that data? That goes a long, long way with auditors when they're going, you actually really have nothing to disclose, or your fine is $2.57, not $257 million, you know, et cetera.
Great. Well, I knew that the most difficult part of my job here today would be to end this conversation. I mean, there's so many different aspects that we could go on, but we are reaching close to the top of the hour. But also, when discussing about cybersecurity, you know, it is a lot of doom and gloom, right? I mean, it is a worrisome thing, but I think, Adam, you might have mentioned something earlier. It's like, while it is a threat and it is a constant struggle, it's not something that can't be addressed. So maybe I'll throw to each of you maybe just some final thoughts with the glass half full on giving folks a reason to believe that things can be better. You know, maybe I'll start. Betsy, I'll throw that one to you first.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, the peace of mind when you said peace of mind, DJ, that really resonated with me, because I think our comprehensive, holistic solution that's right here will give these districts, the students and the teachers, that peace of mind that they can take a deep breath and say, I have the latest and greatest. I know it's the most secure, and I'm securing my data, I'm securing my devices, and I know I have done everything within my power to protect all of that. And so I think that's probably the best way to piece this together.
Yeah, I would say you don't get overwhelmed with how much bad there is. Just take those first steps, right? Find, like DJ said, find what you think your biggest pain point is, or your biggest thing you want to solve, and just tackle that one piece at a time. It's a long game of golf. It's not a single shot. So just there's tons of things, small things you can do, even things that don't cost money. Just take a little time to do some research that can help you be more protected and more secure.
And DJ, as I mentioned last but not least, maybe we'll leave you with the last word.
Yeah, get some evaluation accounts if you are unfamiliar with the product. Get 100 licenses for 30 days or more, and kick the tires on it and see what kind of gaps the products can close for you, and problems that they can solve, and more importantly, make your day easier. Make your day-to-day easier, and your boss is happy with immediate answers that you can give them about possible gaps and how you've just closed them.
Oh.
So.
Well, I see that our time is just about up, so I'm going to wrap things up here. I'd like to thank our presenters today for a very informative presentation, and I'd like to thank all of the audience members for joining us as well. As a reminder, you'll get an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with the slides. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.